And welcome back to Stories from the River. This is your host, Charlie Malouf, and we are in our Global Leadership Summit recap series. And I'm here with Will Luke, our Senior Director of Project Management. Will, welcome back to the pod.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you because I know this topic today is one that's going to get our gears really turning. And I know you're a good gear turning type of guy.
Yeah, there's a lot of thought experiments in this one. I think it raises a lot of theoretical ideas. So we could probably go a long time on this one.
Let's get right into it.
Welcome to Stories from the River, a show in which we go behind the scenes at Broad River Retail.
Today is Tuesday, September 9th. Will and I are recording this on Friday, September 5th. Will, we've come out of our Pioneering the Path Purpose 828 event, our Home Furnishings Expert Series. You've got all the projects in your studio at the office. You're the creator of Project Tops. Our trading cards with our home furnishings experts. You've got your pack as well. I love it because I collected baseball cards as a kid. And, our Columbia Grand reopening, our one of our biggest weeks we've ever had, big milestone week. How did it feel for you? And then we had, this was on Friday, August 8th, 8/8 was the topic we're going to talk about today was recorded on 8/8. That seems almost like a millennia ago.
Yeah, it definitely feels like the last few weeks have been a complete blur, Charlie. So it's funny to think that, hey, if I can just go back to working on Project Cascade, that's the easy one. And of course, it's not the easy one, but it feels that way after the last few weeks. And I know you've been trying to get me on here for a bit, and I said to Edie, I promise I'm not dodging Charlie. Like, you can send him screenshots of my calendar if you want.
No, we're going to get into what calendars can tell us in this episode. Well, let's. It's been a busy season, but now we're into fall, like pumpkin spice season, and all things nice. So this was Dr. James Hewitt. He was introduced on the stage as James Hewitt, and when you Google James Hewitt, you get something connected to Princess Diana. So that was kind of strange. But so he came from Cambridge. Over across the pond, Cambridge, England, and he is a human performance scientist. And so he goes by Dr. James Hewitt, and he wrote a book called Regenerative Performance. And it's interesting. What I really like about kind of what he started with, he was a cyclist. He was like a world-class cyclist, and all was about like effort and optimization, and I'm just going to go, 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 go. He moved, I think, to France, became a professional cyclist, and understood like, hey, when you're cycling, you're kind of going up hills throughout terrain, and you're just pedaling miles. I'm not a professional cyclist, but I do a lot of road cycling, so I appreciate that aspect of it. Just someone who's talking about, optimizing. I was curious to see where he was going with it, Will, but, and then he kind of has translated that into kind of what he does today. But I had never heard of Dr. James Hewitt before, and he is a treasure trove of just stats and knowledge. And I think he had his keynote talk basically memorized and talked for like 45 minutes nonstop without kind of saying an or taking a break.
Yeah, I really like kind of the structure of his talk. And, some speakers go in kind of the meandering route, and that is entertaining, but it's hard to follow. And I thought he was really just super buttoned up with how he kind of set the table, how he introduced the framework, and then really how he unpacked the framework. So it was really kind of digestible and practical for me.
Let's talk about how he got to becoming a regenerative human performance scientist. So he goes through this career in cycling. He goes. He gets married. He has 2 young kids. He thinks he's a super efficient multitasker, and he's working for a human performance company in Switzerland. And he's like going nonstop. He's all about speed and effort and optimization, and just cranking through life. And one day in the shower, he feels a lump. He had cancer, and it's like he said, it's like someone put something through a spoke in his tire when he's going at top speed, and just as a flip, instead of falling on the tarmac safely, he falls into like the medical table. And he fortunately had gotten cured from the cancer through the chemotherapy and everything, but it was the first time in his life he was forced to pause and reflect. And he said, if I had never done that, it just wouldn't have been sustainable. And that kind of forcing his life coming to a screeching halt forced him to kind of think about work and performance at work a little bit differently. And he really kind of took this parallel thinking of, hey, when I was a cyclist, we thought about gears and we thought about low, middle, and high. And he goes, for the knowledge worker, I think there's also this thing about gears, cognitive gears, low cognitive, middle cognitive, and high cognitive. And how can we get into high cognitive gears? But I don't think you can do that like going fast all the time. And he's presenting a business case for a third way, as opposed to like just effort and optimization or performance. And he's talking about a third way.
Yeah, I mean, you caught a lot of it. I mean, he talks about his near-death experience and how that really caused him to pause after 20 years of going fast. And yeah, I don't know what things he actually said and what things I'm kind of infusing in here as I've processed, but I know he shares the equation of effort plus optimization equals peak performance. And, the way I interpret that is that he was really stuck in the effort phase. And so much of us are, right? It's just more effort, more effort, more effort. And how many of us pause to do that optimization? And really that experience forced him to do that first reflection that he'd done in his career. And then he overlays that with the workplace well-being crisis. And he talks about how organizations, I've it written down here, spend $70 billion annually on well-being initiatives. But really all studies show that 90% of employees say workplaces are still getting worse. And so that's really the ultimate paradox that, workplaces are seeing this opportunity. They're investing in it. They're doing the right thing by caring about their people, but it's not necessarily yielding the fruit. And so why does that paradox exist? And are we maybe addressing the right root issues?
What I really appreciate about what he's done, Will, is he says, I was training, world-class athletes and on performance and figuring that out. And now we've got all these kind of world-class tools at work. Why isn't work getting better? Why is this still this burnout crisis and the well-being crisis? And that's what he started to reflect on, how he could take parallels from the physical aspect and all these tools that have been thrown at us, and how can we kind of use the tools more effectively than letting the tools abuse us or use us. So let's kind of start by maybe defining these gears. He says the high gear is a deliberate focus on efficient, impactful, priority-driven work. And we want to be able to do more of that and have that be a bigger percentage of our workday. He called the middle gear, the middle cognitive gear, as switching emails, meetings, less complex tasks. And then he called the low gear is the rest and low-level activity. And so did you have anything else on the definition of the gears?
Yeah, I think he mentions that the majority of us and the majority of leaders spend 70% of their time stuck in the middle gear. So that's really part of the discovery here is we don't want to be in the middle gear. And then I think it really everybody creates their own framework in a language they understand. But I think the way that this really connected for me is the parallel of actual cycling, right? We've all been on a bike and haven't got in the right gear when we get to a hill. And if you're in that right gear, you can go up the hill. And if you're not in the right gear, you're walking real fast up that hill. And so we've all experienced that, but we still, sometimes we still hit that cognitive hill, so to speak, and we're in the wrong gear.
Yeah. It's a great analogy. So he said, let's tackle the middle gear. He said, he gives us 4 ways. Let's tame our email inbox. And so he said, rethink promises to respond rapidly. He says sometimes some of us leave there's a propensity for knowledge workers to leave their inbox on in the background and to treat every response like an instant message. Like I gotta respond. And like, no, you don't have to respond right away. He said, actually, you can batch your email use to specific parts of the day when you can just kind of say, I'm going to have these day parts where I'm going to respond to emails. And if people need to reach you for emergencies, you can actually like kind of reset their expectations in your email signature. Like, hey, I'm only going to respond from 8 a.m. to 9 a.m., 12 p.m. to 1 p.m., and 4 p.m. to 5 p.m. If you have something that's super urgent, and he didn't provide those specifics, I'm just giving that by way of example. He said, if you have something super urgent, you can hit me on like WhatsApp or message or something like that. So it was like taming your email inbox was number one. Did you have anything else on that?
I think I'd add he talked about resetting the expectations too, right? So just doing it is not enough, especially if you have a culture that expects fast response, or maybe, someone like me, love it or hate it. I hold myself to a standard of quick response. And so if I were to change the way I did things, I'd feel like I'd want to preempt that with people so that they didn't think that I was slipping on my communication. So I think he mentioned you could even put it in your email signature saying, I've scheduled email time at 4:00 this afternoon, and I'll review emails at that time. So it's almost like a more of a macro out of office, if you will.
Yeah. I think it does have to be like cultural for an organization. It'd be odd if just one person in a 100-person organization was doing this email management piece and not everyone else was. So you do have to kind of change the cultural. So the cultural expectation is that we're going to not be slaves to our inboxes and respond kind of when we can batch the use. I'm reminded of a work that Hill Country Holdings and Sean Seals and Gary Seals did many years ago, and they kind of use subject lines by like inform only or response requested. And I think as we get into the next thing he talks about with calendars, it's also who do you CC on there? I mean, he didn't say that, but you could also be cognizant. If you're going to be cognizant of who to include in your meetings, you may also want to be cognizant of who you CC or not include on your emails, and then the reply all. But so there's a whole science about kind of managing your emails differently. But the one thing he said is you don't have to treat it like instant message, because that will interrupt you, and that's going to keep you stuck in middle gear, the burnout gear. Like, use it, don't let it use you. And then moving beyond that, he said another way to tackle this middle cognitive gear is, he talked about gathering data from office calendar software. And he said there's one person to blame. It is the meeting makers. Who is setting the meetings? And he said tackle the meeting makers by answering the following 4 questions. Have I thought it through? Like, before you go set a meeting, have you actually spent your own time reflecting and thinking it through? Number 2, do I really need outside input, to set a meeting? Number 3, does this require real-time interaction versus asynchronous interaction where I can just send a memo on it? And we get that critique a lot sometimes in some of our meetings. You could have just sent me an email with this update. And number 4, what is the best tool for the meeting? But I'm reminded of, as I was listening to that part of the talk, and I've re-listened and rewatched it a few times now, just when you think about the cost of a meeting, when you look at everyone's time, but it's not even just the cost of the meeting and the people in the meeting, it's their context switching and the time you're taking away before and after the meeting or the meeting prep. So there's a lot of cost in meetings, and we shouldn't be so liberal to just have meetings. He says you got to tackle these recurring meetings. So anyways, I was smiling thinking about you watching that one, not because you're one of the meeting makers. I just thought that you would really resonate.
So I definitely am the meeting maker. He says 5% of people generate 60% of meetings. So I thought that this was my intervention this morning, Charlie. But yeah, I mean, I feel like we could probably talk for hours on this alone, and me being in the project space and having to gather so many minds and folks together, this is something that I've been in my head about, is that conundrum about uh, needing input, needing collaboration, needing decisions, but also being mindful of the cost and the time equation of that meeting. To me, this feeds into number one. I think sometimes setting more meetings is a consequence of poor email optimization. And so maybe, I don't know whether he structured it this way, but maybe there was some foundational element, because I sometimes think, I got to set a meeting because I can't get an answer, and I need to create that peer accountability, or I need to create that kind of finish line, or kind of false milestone, if you will, so that I can get an answer. But if I could just get the answer over email, then I wouldn't have to set the meeting. And so I think you nailed it on the head, that one or two people can't lead this revolution. It's really a revolution, if we think it's valuable, that we all have to lead together and talk through, okay, what is our culture going to look like, right? And I think about I think Jeff Bezos has a lot of meeting rules inside of Amazon, and I know Brene Brown has talked a lot about kind of how to structure a great meeting, and I know there's so many others, but I'm a big fan of having that methodology, but I realize for some that probably feels restrictive and legalistic and boring. And
well, first of all, this is not your meeting maker intervention, so let me put your heart and mind at ease on that one. That's a pretty profound insight, though, that you've got. I think you're saying that, hey, I wonder if a symptom of poor email inbox management, a symptom of that is having to then solve that with superfluous meetings. And I had not thought about that. I wrote down this quote. He said, the meeting maker must be crystal clear about the purpose of the meeting, who must be there, and commit to being fully present. Now, that last point, he said, there's data that suggests that being fully present saves the executive's time, because so many people are halfway paying attention. They have their laptops open. They're in other meetings, in other distractions. And so, if you are going to be in a meeting, be in the meeting. Otherwise, don't tend to the meeting. I would also say, Will, I think you're very cognizant of your job function requires you to set meetings and corral people who are stakeholders. But I think you're very thoughtful in terms of laddering down who all needs to be in that meeting, when do I need to do it, not being excessive about it. And also sometimes having an important meeting on a major enterprise project milestone, it's good to have a deadline, because if I haven't gotten to the task or the update, I know I've got a meeting coming up that I've got to be in there and report to or give my update, I better get that done. So moving beyond that, he said, to trial. Now I know you're going to love this one, because you're very good at testing AI to help you work smarter. But he said, trial some AI employee alliances. He said, people are concerned. He said, there's a large swath of people who are concerned about AI taking their jobs, but then there's an even greater percentage of people who want AI to help them do their jobs more efficiently. And he said, use AI to summarize and categorize messages automatically. Use AI to take notes to reduce attendance requirements and FOMO, the fear of missing out on the meeting, and use AI to draft well-worded messages to replace meetings. And so anyways, he said, ultimately, reducing inefficiency and saving hours from the middle gear can lead to having more time for the high gear. So any thoughts on the AI employee alliances?
Yeah, I think we're still just scratching the surface on that. But you and I were talking earlier about, sometimes when we're attending a meeting, we have to wear multiple hats in that meeting. It could be that we're the facilitator, so we're guiding conversation and maybe trying to draw things out or keep things on track. We're also a contributor to the meeting, where we have to be thinking creatively and digesting what people are saying and interacting with that. And then we also might be taking notes, and to do all of that kind of simultaneously is difficult, even for the best of us. And so it really is a hack if you can reduce some of those brain calories, so to speak, by having a tool that can take notes for you, that can summarize kind of key action items. And I know you and I have chatted about this, about a lot of the cool new softwares out there that can do that for you. I haven't got into the email categorization space. Fortunately, I don't feel like that's as big of an opportunity for me, but meeting notes is definitely that's where I need it the most.
Yeah. Well, it's good to kind of be reminded, like, don't continuously just keep treading water. You can get more work done in the high gear, which is what we all want to do. If you can work smarter, not harder. That may be one of the themes to do more of your, what Cal Newport would call the deep work. There's ways to kind of, you don't have to kind of pedal fast 24/7. He said he asked a high performer, when do you do your best work for high gear work? And this guy, he gives examples of a Sarah and a Michael, and one person was burning out and one person was leaving work early because he was 5 o'clock because he's burnt out. And he said, I'm going to challenge you one day per week to come in later and stay later. And this guy, Michael, found out that he got more work done on that day and worked less. What James Hewitt is really talking about is there's an underlying biological rhythm, and not all of us are wired to get up at 5 a.m. and start just cranking away. People have, they're like the early bird chronotype, peaks in the morning, then they hit their valley, and then they rebound. And the night owl chronotype rebounds in the morning, then they hit their valley, but then they're peaking in the later hours. And so he said sustained high performance is less about the hour that the work's being done and more about the alliance with your natural circadian rhythms. And when you identify your ideal chronotype or circadian rhythm, try to block off some time for that high cognitive work. And so there's so many parallels to things I've heard, read, or listened to. And this reminds me of Daniel Pink's book, When. I mean, This is all about being aligned with your natural rhythms. So how did you respond to that?
Yeah, so much to say here. So first off, this gives me permission to set meetings at 8 o'clock at night. So that was my first take. I'm joking.
Maybe with other people who are night owls, maybe.
Yeah. So, I mean, a couple kind of thought paths I've gone down here. Number one is, we have an interesting org that we have a corporate culture, but we also have a retail culture that works inside those defined hours. So how do we find that balance on that there's certain times that we have to work and certain times that deadlines have to be hit, but then there's other areas where we have that flexibility. So how do we find that kind of in our kind of unique structure? And, I think for me, I often if I get really anxious about my workload, and fortunately this doesn't happen too often anymore. Early in my career, it was working at night, but if I get really anxious about my workload and after dinner, I crack my laptop, what I found is that if I work from 8 o'clock to midnight, I feel like I can get 4 days of work done. And sometimes that kind of power through, which really is high gear, right? And then if you think about that, is that my high gear time because of my chronotype, or is that my high gear time because the middle gear distractions aren't coming through where I'm switching? And so if I implement those email rules where I don't hear a beep and a notification from email and Teams and all the other things that are open, can I achieve that same level of hyper focus at any time in the day and not just at nighttime? Also,
I think our natural circadian rhythms might change as we get older, and adapt. And I can go through cycles and I can force myself to I'm going to get up super early, but we'll get into the sleep topic and kind of how he's talked about prioritizing that. But he did say, when you work, the peak period is individualized, and it might be individualized for the season you are in your life. I know when I was in college, I could definitely work a lot later, and it's geared towards high cognition work. But he said to your point, what you work on, for most people, multitasking slashes productivity by 40%. And he said, consider switching to single tasking and see if that changes your productivity. He said, the mere presence of our smartphone on our desk reduces our performance by 10%. Now, when I'm in a meeting, for years, I might have my smartphone on my desk, but I have it face down. I don't have it buzzing, vibrating, or ringing. And I can go for hours upon hours without responding to text messages. I'll get to them when I can. I just can't be, if I'm constantly responding, I just can't stay focused. So, but I do think, like, in case there is a super emergency, I might have to check it and make sure, but I'm not going to let it go into processing state until I can kind of process that. So anyways, that's I got a couple more comments here, but I want to pause and let you chime in on anything else here on this point.
I think the only thing I'd add is that he said only 2.5% of people are true multitaskers. And I think there's a big self-awareness piece that a lot more people think that they're multitaskers than probably actually are. And I kind of thought about that for me, that I think I'm pretty good at multitasking. Like, I think I can walk and chew gum. But can I actually, and am I just deceiving myself and essentially keeping myself stuck in that middle gear?
Well, let's say that you and I both could, right? And we've probably conditioned and trained ourselves to be effective at it. He might say, whether you are or aren't, if you were single task oriented, working on deep work without you might be less prone to burnout, fatigue. And so one of the themes of his talk is like, this is a marathon, not a sprint. And so how to build this high gear optimization over a long period of time, over a lifetime. And so, I think in a modern day of work, we can certainly, condition ourselves to be effective at multitasking. But to your point earlier, it might be a condition of dealing with symptoms of, lack of email discipline, lack of messaging discipline, lack of interruptions, or lack of discipline to like day parting and not getting enough of that cognition work. So we deal with it, but that ultimately there could be some consequences downstream on that. And so he said, how you work, feed your focus, starve your distractions, retrain your brain. And after we do all of that, then we need to regenerate. Okay. So he says, well, how can we build capacity and re-energize with quality sleep and daytime breaks? So now he's going into sleep. and he says a high performance day begins the night before. Not sleeping enough elevates stress and lowers IQ by 15 points. And so again, just going into like other things I've read and talked about with sleep, I had to bring a few aids. Win the day. And Mark Batterson talks about, winning the day begins the night before, and the wisdom that some of the, ancient religions had with that. And then, he talks about getting in flow state. I read this book, The Art of Impossible by Stephen Kotler, and it's all about kind of getting into that flow state and what's required to do that. And so he's like, hey, and Dr. Andrew Huberman talks about it all the time. There's so much on sleep wellness he's talking about like. And so I've been like, now I wear this Whoop, and I'm always like looking at my recovery score. I'm like, well, okay, how do I feel if I'm making sure that I get enough sleep the night before? And he says, prioritize. He says, if you've been awake for 18 hours, it's equivalent to being legally drunk. And prioritize high quality sleep. For most people, not all people, but most people, that means 7 to 8 hours. And ask yourself, to see if you're getting enough sleep, ask yourself the following 2 questions. Number 1, can you wake up without an alarm about the time you're supposed to? And number 2, can you get through the average day without feeling too sleepy? And so he gets into his top tips for better sleep, which who knew we're going to watch this, Global Leadership Summit keynote talk on high performance. And we're talking about sleep. It's just about, he says, consistency is key. Darkness is your friend. Cut off coffee at midday and think in ink. Write down your thoughts and journal before bed. He says, sleep is not lost time. It is a strategic investment in everything we care about being awake for. The mood boost associated to improving employee sleep is the equivalent to winning $230,000. He said, think about that next time you get to like bonus season. He said, sleep sets the foundation. So that's a lot on sleep. I'm sorry, I got a little bit fired up on that topic. Anything you want to add there?
I just had a book, Matthew Walker, Why We Sleep. He's a neuroscientist. It's one I read a couple years ago, and it was pretty phenomenal and pretty humbling.
What was that book about?
It's basically a neuroscientist talking about the importance of sleep. And I don't know if this was the intent of the book, but this is how I walked away from it, with kind of being scared of all of the health impacts of not effectively sleeping.
Another person who talks about quality sleep is Ariana Huffington. And so there's a lot of people who are prioritizing sleep and not trying to be this zombie hustle culture. And so it does set the foundation. I just love that quote. Sleep is not lost time. It is a strategic investment in everything we care about being awake for. Okay. Yeah. So, because it gets into this whole thing about regenerating and like not going at full speed all the time. You can't, but going through making sure that you can optimize for those peaks, and being that long distance, we all want to be kind of long distance high performers. And then he talks about these daytime breaks. He said daytime breaks matter too, but he said 50% of the people don't take breaks during the day. And he said sometimes our most important work doesn't look like work at all. Think about it. So this is the thing in this industrial mindset, we really have to get our, we always want to look busy. We always want to stay busy. It makes us feel productive. He goes, no. Sometimes our most important work doesn't look like work at all. Why? Because some of our best ideas come to mind when we least expect them. When we pause and let our minds wander, our brain can enter this default mode and then we're more likely to experience what he calls random, episodic, silent thought. And he said, when we rest, we're more likely to experience the flashes of insight that characterize greater creativity. And he says, next time you need a breakthrough, take a break. And it only needs to be 5 to 10 minutes long. Idle time is not a waste of time. And so this reminded me of Joey Ryman's book, The Story of Purpose. And it's not a really well-known book, but he's got this whole concept of ideation. And so he was one of the great creative brand thinkers of our generation, had a great brand agency. And so some of these creative types, they kind of understand you've got to allow yourself some time for reflection and ideation to kind of let those groundbreaking ideas emerge, which can let you have those exponential gains.
I have a lot to say on this, Charlie. We could probably go overtime on this topic. So I think you hit a lot of the sound bites. When we rest, we get flashes of insight, and then idle time is not a waste of time. But a couple places I go with this. Number one is teaching new leaders, right? And I think about early in my career, you feel like you need to maximize the time, and you feel like you need to be a good steward of what the company expects of you. And if you were to tell me, hey, Will, take a walk on the clock and try and solve a creative problem, I may feel that is me stealing time or not being a good employee. And so teaching, especially new leaders, that kind of thinking time, Keith Cunningham, Road Less Stupid, that thinking time to strategize is vital and necessary. I think for some people, it creates a conundrum where they feel like, well, I'm not actually working. And encouraging them, no, you are actually working is vital. I think I discovered this personally to where we could probably film a whole other podcast about this too, but I feel like I hit a wall in my career around 2020 and was kind of at a low fulfillment, and lots of things were happening both at work and behind the scenes. And fortunately, I feel like I came out on the other side, the best version of myself. But one of the things that was the year I started traveling. And, that's why I have the tattoo here, really to commemorate that I I felt that when I was walking walking in Utah, where I felt like I was on the surface of another planet, I felt like really for the first time in my life, a lot of all the tabs that are open, the tabs were closing. And I felt like I had the most kind of thinking clarity and the least noise in my brain that I'd ever had. And so to me, what that taught me is that my best time is when I'm walking, sometimes driving, so when somebody says, "Hey, I need a new name for a project, or I need a new name for a team," if I'm walking or driving, that's when those ideas come best. And part of my process is I got to go through a lot of really bad ideas to get to the good idea, but none of that happens if I say, "Okay, I got 5 minutes to come up with this." I have to let my brain get stuck on that, and only stuck on that for a long period of time.
Yeah. Well, as knowledge workers, we're not compensated for looking or being or acting busy all the time. We're really compensated for those key decisions that we make, or those key thought breakthroughs that we make. And so take a break, let your mind wander, regenerate, let it reflect in different areas of your home or your walk or your work, to kind of be pondering and see what illuminations happen. He says when organizations prioritize positive recovery, they see burnout decline and performance boost. He said rest is not a reward, it's what makes great work possible. And so the regenerative performance tools are the cognitive gears: rescue time from the middle cognitive gear, improve efficiency in the high cognitive gear, build capacity and re-energize in the low cognitive gear through adequate sleep and daytime breaks. He says organizations with the highest employee well-being outperform stock market indices by about 20%. So he talks about a leader's personal well-being was the number one predictor of organizational well-being and the number 3 predictor of organizational performance. And so you have to kind of lead yourself well. And he said your personal commitment to regenerative practices isn't just about your own sustainability. It could be the most powerful lever that we have to transforming the performance and well-being of our entire organization. When we commit to building our capacity rather than just spending it, we create ripple effects that could reshape our team's entire approach to work. I love that. I got to say that one more time. When we commit to building, or I'll say it the way he said it, when you commit to building your capacity rather than just spending it, you create ripple effects that could reshape your team's entire approach to work. And he says the path to regenerative performance is about building your capacity rather than just spending it, finding a new flow and a rhythm of effort and renewal. This is regenerative performance, a third way to sustain excellence in our always on world. I thought that was a pretty powerful close for me, Will.
Yeah, I can't say it any better than that. I think the one question he adds in there was, how can an organization promote proactive recovery? And you think, okay, if I have people on my team who maybe aren't necessarily committed to doing this on their own, how can I create an environment to whether either it kind of pulls them, kind of creates guardrails that forces them to do it, or inspires them to have this proactive recovery. And I mean, you could even argue, not an argument, our event last week, Purpose 828, was really us promoting proactive recovery, because we were taking so many of our leaders out of their environment, bringing them into a different environment, and putting them really into thinking time and giving them inspirational content to think about that hopefully creates kind of a separation from just being stuck in middle gear.
That's true. And then it's, what are we going to do with it? Right. And so, last week, the Purpose 828 event was the Pioneering the Path event was like, drinking from a fire hose, and it felt good. It was a great experience. It was super memorable. It got us all fired up and inspired. But now, like what we're doing right now is we're revisiting these talks and we're replaying them and rewatching them because we were drinking from a fire hose for 2 days. And to me, it helps me kind of install and remember, because you can't be in peak state for 2 full days as all this content's kind of flowing at you. And it's really getting you to pause, to ponder, to reflect. And a lot of it needs revisiting. And so that's why I like us doing these recap series, because it kind of forces to go back and rewatch it. I only wish we had more access to the videos on demand. There's a good that it's got a deadline to it, but I want more time so I can not lose the ability to go back and watch that content. But hey, at least right now we've got an introduction to James Hewitt. He's making it okay to think about pausing, sleeping well, taking breaks, to separate from the hustle, always on culture, and to think about a way to kind of maybe work smarter, get more into flow state, be well rested, not to be stuck in middle gear, middle cognitive gear. But if you want to be a high performing knowledge worker over a long period of time and to go win that marathon and to be sustainable and to be always on, to be available to your family, your friends, and yourself and your team, and to have a high performing company, then make sure that we get enough time in our high cognitive gear. And so he's just given us tools to be able to regenerate, to be able to do that. Regenerative. I love that he is a high performance scientist. And so I think if nothing else, he's got a book that we will link to and that we'll share that just came out this past August. And he's got a lot of science and wisdom on it. So maybe we'll endeavor to go do a deeper dive and explore these topics a little bit more as we think about kind of optimizing the way that we approach work and using tools to our advantage as opposed to letting tools use us.
Align. Agreed.
All right. Well, Will, thank you so much for taking some time with me to recap. I know that this topic really resonated with you, so I'm glad I got you on the pod for our Global Leadership Summit recap series. We got a few more of these recap episodes to go, and so check back next time on Thursday. I think I'm going to get Will in the studio to review Dr. John Maxwell's talk from the GLS 25. Thanks so much for joining us. We try to bring you the freshest behind the scenes content from retail, from what we're experiencing, living through, going through, thinking about, working on every Tuesday and Thursday, whether you're on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, or wherever you dial in. So thanks so much. Leave us a comment, feedback, subscribe, follow, whatever the kids are doing these days.
Thanks for listening to Stories from the River. To check out more episodes, visit storiesfromtheriver.com. To watch this episode, go to youtube.com/@storiesfromtheriver. Join us again next week, and remember to like, rate, and subscribe to the podcast.